Thierry embrace. Original sin. Genesis.
On the sixth day of the creation of the world, God said,
Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth.
Our ancestors have transmitted us the idea from generation to generation that God intended here to allow us being violent toward animals to feed ourselves. But nothing yet has been controlled by humans in this order of thought. Species disappear one after another without one man to know how to save them. We couldn't call a master to be effective following such a desertion of subordinates. Beside our ability to defend ourselves against the largest number of species, we do not have much control. Also, note that it is rarely possible to be sure not to consume the last animal or the last specimen of a species. The extinction of the species has always been a possible risk, and to kill an animal has always been a suicidal act. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them,
Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth.
This is even before the supposed sin of the flesh between Adam and Eve, which resulted in chastity as a high degree of purification according to religious rites, that God had ordered that humans male and female made like other animals to populate the world. Thus, Adam and Eve would have been rebuked for being obedient. Is it not contradictory that God would punish as those that he had blessed, and that he had declared twice in his image in this matter? And God said,
Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seeds which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life. I have given every green herb for meat.
And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and, behold, it was very good. Will we deny the decrees of God on this sixth day of inception? Did God appointed only one single other animal as food for a precedent? Has he not declared the plant kingdom as any food for the animal kingdom? Are we going to subordinate perfectly vegan animals under the omnivorous man? Does God wish to be unjust towards these ruminants, insects and rodents which are more obedient to him than humanity? And the Lord God commanded the man, saying,
Of every trees of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die.
The innocence of the original men in this place of abundance prevents the idea of violence to reach Adam and Eve. They are unaware of the evil that represents the desire to control the existence of another animal. As soon as they will have done, they will be plunged into a fear of being liable to the same cruelty, associating themselves with the killed animal. Thus, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is precisely the animal kingdom. When we eat the fruit, we know good and evil, love and cruelty. This causes a degeneration of social relations by the sins. Subsequently, it was not surprising that man has been put before all the fruits of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Thus, God made him name every bird and every animal on the fields by Adam himself. It is in the immediately following verses that there was mention of this. Adam was therefore educated specifically on what he should avoid killing. It is worth noting that the scriptures mention that the first animals, as any trees, were made from the soil. It appears that this ellipse is intended to bring animals closer to the famous defended tree in a veiled way. Eve was conceived only after Adam. Questioned by the snake, she replied,
We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said,
Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die.
The animals are between the tops of the trees and the ground under which extend the roots of the plants. Therefore, the forbidden fruit is the animal kingdom once more. But the serpent said to the woman,
Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil.
And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her. And he did eat. Here, there is complicity. The man is present during the dialogue. Adam is so willing to go against the opinion of God. The idea of being tempted by the woman don't stand. In addition of breaching to his duty of educator, man has reneged to God. It is therefore as a result that they realized that they could now be hunted down by a predator themselves and that the latter could even be a cannibal. Thus was born the first idea of armor or pageantry. It was also perhaps an intuitive scheming to regain a sense of dignity. Disappeared feeling with the advent of remorse. But with the accumulation of abuse of animals, the idea of armor became certainly necessity. Nowadays, our proud submarines, destroyers, fighter jets, armored tanks, shelters and nuclear missiles are the prolongation of laurel leaves. Will we continue toward Star Wars now and corrupt in addition to Earth, space as well? Don't we wish for our true vocation of keeping and cultivating the Garden of Eden? Have sins not led us instead to abuse it, deprive it and pollute it? After having punished the snake so that it crawls and that it is despised by women, God punishes the woman.
I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception in sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee.
The women are physiologically more vulnerable than men. In a cruel environment, her body is less conducive to confrontation. It is the cause of her desire that goes towards a strong man and eventually ranked and rich. On his side, and just as much consistently, man becomes more narcissistic and selfish. He loses concern for others' feelings. He has many children to be assisted in his necessary works and his superfluous erections in opposition to those of other men. Consequently, the mother is not so eager to have children, but assumes these pains to maintain his protection. Thus, she doesn't have children by true love, resulting in an education of the latter who end up torturing both parents immersed in sins. From the culture of barbaric negligence occurs so all the abuses that can be inventoried by the offspring. Similarly, God said to the man,
Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree, of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of its waste thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return.
This advice was also consistent. It was to prevent the man to indulge in his cruelty and thus to the annihilation of his species in the short term. God brought him into the sufficient state of survival so that he must spend most of his time saving his life. Thus, a break was given to promising individuals most capable to cohabitation into communes. And Yahweh God said,
The man is become as one of us, to know good and evil.
God wanted to protect his Garden of Eden of subsequent abuse. He therefore took the man out of this place for another more arid place. If a perfect garden did not satisfy man, then how should he be responsible for its preservation? The soil and climate being less fertile there, he was therefore forced to work the land with rigor in order to just survive, and this, with less pleasing food production. What makes him more naughty and unhappy than in his original state?